Well, I want to thank you for having me today and caring to hear me talk about myself for an hour. I talk a lot. I don't really want to talk about myself. So instead, I'm going to talk about God's providence in my life, because that is everything. And I think if we look at our own lives, we can see God moving. Even at the time, we may not see God moving, but we can see, even looking back on it, God moving in every area of our life. So my particular life, because we do what we do, is kind of summed up in, before I became a singer, it was what grade was I in school. And then after I became a singer, it was what album was out. So when I think back of, 2005, that was the Game Over tour, I think of in those terms. So I've kind of divided my life into chapters, as though this was like an autobiography. So chapter 1, little Billy Itzel. That's me. 1968 to 1980. Providentially, God had me in a Christian family. I was born into a Christian family with Christian parents. I constantly heard of God's, working, and who Jesus was, and the need for salvation in my life. Growing up, not only was I in a Christian family, but we went to a Christian school, and Arlington Baptist. Those of you familiar with the Independent Baptist Church up in Baltimore. I went there from kindergarten to 12th grade, got the Order of the Eagle. It means I went there the whole time. Yeah, it's not. But yeah, I was, so I heard the Bible taught every day in Bible class. I was in chapel once a week. And then not only that, we were raised, back when, we were raised in a Baptist church. So I heard the Baptist, the gospel preached there. So constantly, I was raised in as Christian an environment, I think, as you possibly could in the early 70s. So that was my Christian upbringing. I made a profession at the age of 5, but you all know, all little kids make, of Christian parents want to do what their parents want. And so they, so of course I made a profession at 5. Whether I actually had possession at 5, I don't know. But I do know that I'm saved today, and whenever that happened, it's all part of God's grace and God's plan. So, but I was not only raised around Christianity, I was raised around music. My mother was in a trio with her family. It was my mother and my grandmother and my aunt, and they sang a cappella, the Houck Family Trio. And so I learned very early what harmony was supposed to sound like. And so I just developed a great love for that tight 3-part harmony that they sang. And I, and being raised in that, it just stuck with me. My dad was part of the weirdest ensemble of instruments you would ever imagine, but it worked. They were called the Royal Airs. That's my dad there with the accordion. There was an accordion, a trombone, and 2 trumpets. So you would think that would be a really, really odd combination, and it was, but it really worked. And I grew up singing in church with my mom. I remember my first time I sang with her in a duet. We sang "Why Should I Worry or Fret?" It was a Bill Gaither song. It was the mid-'70s. Everything was Bill Gaither back then. His hymns were very, very popular, so we were singing those in church and church choir. I grew up hearing all kinds of harmony. I got my first record player. My dad gave me some old Blackwood Brothers records, and I loved hearing the 4-part harmony. I would pick out all the parts and learn all the different harmony parts. And so I got that whole gospel harmony idea from my dad and those records. And then my mom gave me 3 Dog Night records. which also had harmony. And so oddly, there was an odd bridge between the Blackwood Brothers of the 1950s and Three Dog Night of the 1970s, and it was that harmony. And so constantly, I would just be up in my room, spinning the records, listening to records. I was part of the school choir growing up at Arlington Baptist. All my years, I would always sing in the school choir. Somewhere, and Waddles, you might be able to tell me where we got this. I got my first guitar, which was a 4-string guitar, and it was not supposed to be a 6-string, but there were only 4 strings on it. It was actually a 4-string tenor guitar tuned like a tenor banjo. Do you remember where we got that?
No, I had it.
You had it?
Yeah, I used to play it on the church bus when we were going places and stuff like that.
You had it, and I found
where I got it.
I found it and learned 3 chords, and I'll have you know, to this day, I've only added 1 more. So that's how I played. But I would play that. We used to go to Shelbourne Baptist Church, and their children's worship would be across the street in the elementary school there, and I would lead worship with my little 4-string guitar. I still remember the 3 chords, you know, and everything would have to be in that key because that's the only key I knew, and I had not found out the joys of the capo yet. So I would lead worship there. So that was my early growing up years and how I was just saturated with harmony, saturated with music. So then in 1980, I became a teenager. And yes, that's where the cowboy hat started. So I was a teenager from 1980 to 1988. We moved to a new church, which was Halethorpe Community Church up in Halethorpe, which is southwest Baltimore. And we lived near there, and there were so many opportunities for music in that church. When I first got there, we formed a youth trio. It was a youth choir, but there were only 3 of us who sang. So it became a youth trio. I joined the youth group there, because that's what you do. I sang in the youth choir. I sang in the adult choir. I sang tenor, but usually toward the ends of songs, which if you know choral music for choirs, you know, it always goes up in the end. And I always had an ability to go up into the really high range. And of course, we would all the tenors would jump up to the alto and soprano parts at the end and just really make the altos and sopranos mad. You never told us not to do that, but I met a man.
I did. You didn't listen.
No, that's true. I didn't listen. I met a man who's and this is the providence of God here too. I met a man named John Mays. John Mays, John Mays is the guy in the jacket right there. I was a teenager. He was in his 50s. In fact, he was younger than I am now. Which is funny to think about, because he just seemed, you know, old to me, because I was only, 15, and he and his wife we just really connected, and we would go out every Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon after church, because we'd sing tenor in the choir together, and we would go out every Sunday after church to a buffet. That's where this all started. So we would eat at the buffet, come back to his house, listen to gospel bluegrass music, because he was just really into bluegrass music, which again, you know, was harmony. And then we would go to church, and we had a trio, the gospel bluegrass trio, and we would practice for like 2 hours, whether we were singing Sunday night in church or not. Because we just loved to sing, and we developed harmony. I learned how to blend, because his voice was nothing like mine, but I learned how to blend with him. These are a couple of other groups that I either started or joined. The Masters Quartet up there at the top, and then this was a group called Majesty. That was my mom in that as well. down there. So I was always singing almost every Sunday. One of those would do special music. So I was always practicing. I was always singing. But John was a great person in my life at the age of 15, because he was a very godly man, and he and I would not only talk music and talk harmony and talk bluegrass music and stuff, but we would talk theology too. And as a teenager, that was very, very invaluable to me, to have him constantly talking about the things of God. It was literally, an older man passing along to a younger man, and he was such a great blessing in my life. Well, I started to write songs when I got into 11th grade. I'd like to say they were all Christian songs, but I was in 11th grade, which means it was all about girls. And I would like to say they were all really good songs, but I will tell you now, none of them were. I listen back to them every once in a while, and it's like, but practice makes permanent. So I kept practicing and writing songs, and I got a little better over time. And one of the best things I found in writing songs was listening to other people's songs. You learn how other people craft songs. I really was getting into country music at the time, and so I learned a lot about how country music, how they write their songs, how they'll have a real good hook going into the chorus, very catchy chorus, and I just learned how to write songs from listening to a lot of songs. So I had a lot of practice, because I wrote a lot of songs that hopefully no one will ever hear again. I continued to teach myself guitar, and like I say, I learned one more chord, so I was now up to 4. I started to bang around on the piano a little bit. I knew one whole how to play in one key in the piano, and my dad bought a sequencer, which is kind of like a synthesizer, only sort of upgraded and has better sounds. And so I learned how to sequence, and I started, making my own cassettes. And in fact, I was the nerdy kid in school. This is when I was a senior. I won most musical, because these were my little cassettes that I had, and I would record cassettes, and I'd make copies, and I would carry them around with my books, and I would sell them to the other kids in between classes. I was the biggest nerd ever. I won most likely to be musical, least likely to ever get a date. So that was me. Me, and this is from my yearbook, believe it or not. It's enshrined there. But those are just some cassettes that I literally had my book bag, and I had my box of cassettes that I would go around and peddle to teachers. If you check, I believe Mark and Pam Wigley still have some of those, because they knew me back then, and I tried to get them to destroy them, but they hopefully they don't have anything to play them on anymore. So
put them in your museum, Bill.
Oh, there are many things that I have that could be in some form of a museum. Just no one would ever pay admission to it. But yeah, I still have the originals somewhere up in the attic or somewhere. We had a preaching competition. We had fine arts competition. I would take place every year, and I was in the choir. The choir got to go to Bob Jones one year for the nationals. But I was in choir. I would do solos, and this is through all my years in school. I was even in a preaching competition. Preaching competition. Who thinks this up? I don't know, but I remember you could either choose expository preaching or you could choose topical preaching. And of course, being the Reformed person I am, I chose topical back in the day. And I chose to preach on the 4 soils. And to tell you how good this sermon was, by the end of it, 3 of the 4 were going to heaven. If you know anything about The Force Awakens, yeah, I totally got it wrong, and it was a complete embarrassment. I didn't win, but yeah, and but anyway, I just thought I'd embarrassingly share that with you. I went to college at Arlington Baptist School because that's where I knew. That's where I went to school from kindergarten to 12th grade. I worked there for 2 years afterwards and went to college for 2 years after that. Even though I grew up in and maybe this is because of my age, because I do feel like I see the kids here at this church, and I feel like many of them are so much more mature than we were growing up. But I mean, I was raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a Christian school and had Bible class. I knew enough to like really do well in Bible trivia, those kind of things I learned, but I never really understood any doctrines or anything like that. And that's kind of a shame to be in Christian school that long and in church that long and not really connect with any doctrine. So my first night of college, there was a professor there, and this again is the providence of God. His name was Al Knobloch, and he was a Greek scholar, a Hebrew scholar, and I would tell you I learned more in that first night of college than I did my entire 18 years before that. Because it was just a foundational truths class. But you know, when you find a teacher who knows the Word of God, you know, like we did. I know there are people who, and many of you may be like this, you went to a church that didn't really preach the Word of God, and you came here and learned more in one sermon than you did, you know. And it was like that. It was like my eyes were just opened to understand doctrine. And we went through all the different foundational doctrines of the church. And that has been such a great foundation in my life, in my songwriting. I've taught his class to my kids when they're in high school, the foundational truths from his notes. And it just, to this day, all of that learning still impacts me. So that was another providential person that God brought into my life to really just sort of advance me in being a faithful follower of Christ. So I graduated high school. 15 Minutes of Fame, Chapter 3. We used to do, that's the Spear family. We used to do concerts with our family. It was me and my brother and my sister and my mom, and my dad would play piano. And we would travel around and we would sing Southern gospel music, you know, quartet style music, because we all loved the quartets, we loved harmony, and so we started to gain a little bit of traction there. I think we did, 4 or 5 concerts during that time. And then the summer of 1988 came, and my mom and dad thought it would be a good idea for my brother and I to go down to this school down in Tennessee called the Stamps Baxter School of Music. It was run by a group called the Spear Family, and they had just released an live album called Celebration at Sea. And the guy over in the yellow jacket over there, he had been with the group for 22 years. His name was Harold Lane. I had only been alive for 19 years, so he had been with the group longer than I had been alive, but he was retiring and going off the road. They had gone with a new record company and were looking for a new tenor singer. So the Stamps Baxter School of Music was not only a 2-week school where you could come and learn to read shape notes. Do any of you know what shape notes are?
I know
Okay.
of them because of my husband, but I don't know anything
Yeah.
about it.
Walt would know, right? Yeah. Walt knows it. But yeah, shape notes are like the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, And each note is a different shape. The do is a different shape, the re is a different, so literally, you could not have the staff and you could just have the notes and you'd be able to sing because each note is a shape. It helped you, it helped read, but it was more kind of a southern thing, I believe. And they would teach you how to sing songs in shape notes. You'd sing the do, do, mi, so, re, fa, la, ti, like in the Sound of Music. So that's what they're doing. It's shape note singing. So you would learn how to do that. But I got down there, and providentially, again, we had not signed up for a vocal coach. And there was one vocal coach that everybody was trying to get with because he was an excellent vocal coach. His name was Steve Hurst. And we got down there, and they had several others. And so they came to me and said, "Who do you want?" I said, "Well, Steve Hurst." And somehow, being the last one who signed up, I also got in with Steve Hurst. I can't imagine why, other than just the providence of God. So I had been able to do a couple sessions with Steve, and I was 19 years old at the time, and Ben Spear, one of the Spear family, knew that they were looking for somebody young, because they were all in their 60s. So they wanted some youth and vitality to come in and join the group, and so they went to Steve Hurst and asked Steve, "Is there anybody you think who's like road ready to hit the ground running and go?" And Steve mentioned me. So Ben came to me and said, "We'd like you to try out tomorrow. The other Spears will be in. We'll come and we'll sing." He gave me a copy of this cassette, Celebration at Sea, and he said, "I want you to pick out the tenor part and learn it." Of the whole album. Overnight. So I went with Steve. I found Steve. We picked out a few of the harder arrangements because their arrangements are not all that easy. And we picked out some of the harder song arrangements, and I stayed up pretty late, kind of just learning the songs. So the next day I went in and we gathered around the piano. Now, singing with John Mays taught me how to blend with people that I normally would not blend with. And so the Spears have totally different voices, a little more like John Mays, kind of a thicker voice than I do, but I was able to, I got in the room and I met everybody, and then we sat around the piano and he just tore into some arrangement, and so I just started singing it. And we went through the whole album, and I had the whole album pretty much memorized, the tenor part, and I was able to blend with their voices, and they were just kind of amazed. I was just kind of amazed because I didn't think this is gonna, we see this on American Idol now, where they need to work together overnight to learn a 30-second song. This was a whole album I had to learn the part for. But finally, we finished singing, and they, by the end of the week, had made up their mind that they wanted to hire me. So now I'm just some random kid from Baltimore, from Maryland, which is that state between Virginia and Pennsylvania that all the gospel groups drive through but never stop in, right? There's tons of gospel concerts in Pennsylvania and in Virginia, not so much in Maryland, so, but they wanted to hire me, so they hired me. We went in the studio for the first time. It was my first time being in a studio that was not up in the upper recording room of our church, with a little microphone. I was in, an actual Nashville studio. We recorded an album called "He's Still in the Fire." We had a couple of #1 songs across the country in Southern Gospel. "Saved to the Uttermost," "He's Still in the Fire." Those are still two kind of gospel standards that I was able to not only sing with the Spears, but actually have solos on. These are a couple magazines that we were on. That's me, by the way, in case you couldn't tell, because, it's, yeah. but we had a great time. We would tour like crazy. We toured. We would leave usually Wednesday, either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. We'd get on the bus in Nashville. I moved to Nashville. We would get on the bus. We would do a concert Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night. Drive all night and get back Monday, and then leave either Tuesday or Wednesday. And we did this year round. So we were doing well over 300 concerts a year, and I loved it because I'm 19, out on the road. I will tell you, providence of God. The Spears are Nazarene, okay? But they are, Brock and Faye especially, is the guy in the front and his wife in the yellow right there. They were great people to travel with, especially for a stupid 19-year-old kid who, had I gone with just like a young male quartet traveling around the country and could get into all kinds of mischief, I was able to, they were actually kind of road parents, as it were, for this dumb young kid who's traveling around with them, and it was actually a great time. It was a blessing. We had, in the end, we had 2 Dove and 2 Grammy nominations. That's what they give you if you're nominated for a Grammy Award. So that's what, 1990 and 1991. It's like the Olympics without actually having to put forth a lot of physical effort. So, but that's what they give you. That and a sheet of paper that I can't find in my space. But I have those up on my desk. So, but yeah, we do 300 concerts, and just give you a little taste of what we did. And I will tell you, this is a charismatic church. That's me with the hair. That was at First Church of God in Danville, Virginia. The guy singing with us is not with the Spears. He's the one next to me. He's the pastor of the church, but he's also the one who wrote "He's Still in the Fire." Oh. So we sang at his church. That's why it was packed, and even the choir loft is packed of people. But yeah, that was a big concert for us. But during that time, we were singing in big arenas and things like that. So it was a big time. Which brings us to chapter 4, the undeserved gift. And I'm not talking about our hair. Yes, that's a lot of hair right there.
Of the hair.
I know. The Stamps. So I joined them the first year, 1988, Stamps Baxter School of Music, and then in the most providential thing probably that's ever happened to me is that at the second Stamps Baxter School of Music, I had been with the Spears, and I was doing the devotions in the morning. The Spears had me. They didn't want me teaching shape notes or anything. I didn't know it well enough, but they let me do the devotions in the morning. So I did that. And a young girl from Oklahoma, of all places, came to the Stamps Baxter School of Music. She was a student there, And when I, little story, when we, the first day that the Spears were coming in, all the students had arrived, they met in the cafeteria, and the Spears were arriving. Of course, at the time, it's run by the Spear family, so the Spears are kind of as much rock stars as a Southern gospel group can be in any situation. That was the situation here, because it's like, oh, the Spears are here, the bus pulled up, and all the kids were very excited. And they were especially excited to see me, because I had been a student a year before and now had like the #1 song in the country. So it was, it was like, oh, Bill Itzel. So I don't know whether it was my idea, because it sounds like something I would come up with, or whether our drummer dared me to do it, because that's also possible. But I am not one for like trying to be aloof and obviously. So I'm someone who let's just knock all of their expectations down all in one fell swoop. So I said, do you dare me to walk into the cafeteria, do like a fake trip Chevy Chase pratfall into chairs and have them go flying, like pretend to trip into chairs, just completely make myself look like an idiot. Again, that could come from me, but I also could have been dared to do it. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So I walked in, and they're like applauding for the Spears as we come in, and I do the fake trip over my feet and land into like 3 or 4 chairs, and the chairs just go flying, and I jump up, I'm all right. And so immediately that just put everybody else, that whole idea of, Bill Itzel, he really thinks he's something. Just, set that aside. That's a dumb story, but that's what we did. So, so a few days later, we're eating lunch in the cafeteria, and my brother comes up to me, and he has this girl with him whom he had met in one of his classes, because he came down again to take classes. And he asked Karen, so how old are you? She said, I'm 20, and I was 20 at the time. And she goes, oh, that's perfect. You got to meet my brother. So she brings him over to me and said, oh, Bill, this is Karen. She's from Oklahoma. I was like, oh, it's good to meet you. And so and I just sort of ignored. I don't know why I did. I didn't. She looked like that. So how I don't know what I was thinking. But he goes, oh no, you're going to talk to this girl. So we sat down. We hit it off. I don't know how somebody got a picture of us that week. But evidently, that was the picture of us, I think, the day that we met. And we had no idea that, we would still, 36 years later, still be here. But that I think was the day we met at the Stamps Baxter School of Music, because she has the book that they were using there. So that was the day we met. Not everybody has a picture of the day they met. We dated for 1 year. There's some pictures of us through our date. That's outside of a Sears. The Spear bus pulled up. And that seems weird, but literally that was our day. Our day would be, I would get up at 11, 11:30 in the morning. We'd go in. We'd be outside of a hotel. Go in. The Spears would get one room, and we would just all use the shower. So I would get a shower, get ready, go back to the bus. We'd drive to a mall. We would hang out at the mall for about 3 or 4 hours, and then we'd get on the bus. We'd go. We'd set up. We'd do the concert, tear down, come back. We'd watch movies or listen to music till about 2 in the morning, and then go to bed on the bunks in the bus. Believe me, your whole life is kind of turned around when you're getting up that late and staying up that late and sleeping with a generator going or the bus driving. To this day, I gotta have noise. If it's quiet, I can't sleep. So we have sound machines and all kind of stuff going. The middle one, we went on a cruise. Actually, the Spears were singing on the cruise, and my dad got a bunch of people at our church to go on the cruise, and they had, I think, an extra ticket for Karen, so she came on the cruise. So that's in the Bahamas. This is at Quartet Convention. We might have been married there, I'm not sure. We were? Okay. But anyway, the point is we dated for a year, and then almost to the day, we got married in Nashville. And because it was Nashville, it wasn't a big wedding because everybody I knew was from Maryland and everybody she knew was from Oklahoma. So getting married in Nashville, it was just, the few people, friends that we had who made the trip down. But we got married in Nashville. And then I learned something very quickly. I learned that leaving on a Tuesday night and getting back on a Monday morning and being newly married and spending a full day and a half with your wife is not good and is not going to cut it. So I knew something needed to change. At the time, I had a #1 song, and we were still touring like crazy. Things were going well. We were building, and then something very, very providential again happened in my life. I was nominated for Newcomer of the Year. Now the group that I had been with, the young girl who traveled with us, joined at the same time that I did with the Spears. She was kind of pushed that year, and she won Newcomer of the Year back in 1988, the year before. So it was coming around, and now I was the one who was kind of being pushed by the Spears. That's how the Spears worked. They'd have one person that they sort of would really push, and I was pushed that year. In fact, the single that we had, He's Still in the Fire, was 3/4 my solo. They would come in and sing on the last few choruses, but most of that was me. That's the song we were singing and going crazy on. But most of that song is me doing a solo. So, and it was the biggest radio song at that time in the history of Southern gospel music. Charting wise, the way they do that, I'm not sure of the whole algorithm they use, but I think it's as simple as they take all the reporting stations and their #1 song gets 20 points, #2 song gets 19 points, #3 song gets 18 points, and so on. And then they add up, and who gets the most numbers is the #1 song that year, that month. Ours had been #1 for 2 months, but the biggest song in the history before that got 1,600 points, and it was God on the Mountain. I don't know, by the McCameys. I don't know whether you're ever familiar with any of that. You seem like a Southern gospel group here. But ours had over 2,000. So it was like every radio station was playing it at the same time, is what that meant. So I'm like, all right, if I win Newcomer of the Year, I can parlay this into more influence within the group, or maybe even use it as a stepping stone to a bigger group, other groups that are out there, or even a solo type ministry, that type of thing. So I knew something needed to change, and so I told, my dad was down at convention when they were announcing the winners, and Karen was there, and I told him, I said, if I win, I'll stay with the Spears, and we'll, and I'll continue to be in the industry somehow and try and build from there. If I don't win, then they had already replaced that girl, and this new girl was the one that was getting the push, and I was kind of being shoved off to the background. So I thought to myself, if I stay with the Spears, there really isn't a future here for me. So if I don't win, then we had worked it out. I'll leave. We'll go tell Brock Spear right now. Yeah, as soon as if I lose, we'll go tell Brock Spear that I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. And so, and we'll move back here to Maryland, and we'll start a ministry here. because I have no idea how to do that, but we're just going to try it. So we got up there, and then the two words that changed my life forever was Amy Lambert. The winner of Newcomer of the Year, Amy Lambert. And she was a new singer with a group called the Greens, and hadn't had like any big radio songs, but come to find out, the Greens and the Hoppers kind of sort of ran the magazine. So anyway, so I wasn't going to win that, but I was like, okay, it's time to go. We made a pit stop on the way to the Spears to tell them that I was resigning. To a friend of mine who had been in the industry forever. He was with the Kingsmen, had sung with the Oak Ridge Boys. His name was Jim Hamill, and I talked with him, and he said, if you leave the Spears now, it will be the worst decision you ever make. The record company had told me, if you pay your dues, one day you'll be able to just write your own paycheck. So I ignored them, and it was literally the best choice we ever made. And we moved to Maryland, and we started our solo ministry back in literally 35 years ago this month. It was October. I stayed on a little extra with the Spears through September because they were doing a big East Coast tour and up into Canada. So I stayed for that, and then we left, moved here in October, and started our ministry. I think our first concert was like the 1st of November or something like that. So, but that was 1990, 35 years ago this month. So, my dad did the booking for us because he was a worship leader at our church and had some contacts, and I didn't like talking about myself, ironically. The Spears donated us tracks, which was very nice of them, and free studio time to record our first album, so I'd have some merch to sell. It was called The Stand, Standing Alone. Had a cool photo thing there. That was our first album. We did another album with just piano because, again, I had no money. You know, it's not like working for a big group like that. You make a whole lot of money. The Spears were making pretty good money because they owned the group and they got paychecks. I made what, $240 a week, something like that. So, you know, that's not much, but so we didn't have much to live on. That was after 3 raises. So we got one piano player, and Karen and I did all the vocals on that next album. Then we did an album called Step On Out, and that was in 1991. And it was my first opportunity to actually go in the studio with studio musicians. We borrowed money from my uncle to make this album, and it was kind of songs that I had grown up singing with the Gospel Bluegrass Trio, with the Spears. We redid He's Still in the Fire and Saved to the Uttermost, some old hymns, Send the Light, Life's Railway to Heaven, things we used to sing at church. Karen and I at that time went back to Winfield Bible Chapel, where Pastor Al Noblock was pastoring, and took a lot of classes on Saturdays. But we had to drive all the way up there, which is actually, again, ironic because we now live like 1.5 miles from that church. Where we moved is like literally almost right next to where we used to drive. But we would drive up there, and those were, you know, really, there are times in your life when you sort of really take major leaps forward in your knowledge of who God is. And, you know, and that was one of those times that we did that. Jessica and Ryan were born. They weren't born that big, but that's the only picture I could find without digging too far. But Jessica was born in 1992, and Ryan was born in 1994. we started writing our own songs because immediately I knew two things. One, artists who just keep doing everybody else's cover songs, and there are a lot of those that go around, singing. You're never going to grow a ministry that way. People who write their own songs then become kind of known for those songs, whether they're good songs or not good. But we knew we wanted to write our own songs. Also, I didn't want to have to pay royalties to anybody. It's true. So we started writing our own songs, and during the Step On Out tour, we did a concert that I don't know how we got this concert, because it was like a last-minute thrown-on concert down in what's the place in southern Maryland? Waldorf. It was a big Church of God in Waldorf, and the Tallies were singing. And I think you called the pastor like the day before and said, we're going to be down there. Could Bill Itzel sing a couple songs to open up? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. So we opened up, but I connected with a guy named Roger Talley, who was the piano player, and he was also a producer. And so he and I connected, and he said, I'd love to cut an album for you. So we went down and we recorded an album. I mean, that was a real providential meeting, because up until 2 years ago, Roger Talley did all of our tracks. Like all the tracks we've ever done, Roger Talley produced. So the first one we did, we went down there. This was the most expensive album we've ever done. It probably cost about $9,000 or so by the time we drove down there and recorded and everything else. It was called Live by the Sword. There he used a producer who had produced one of the Spear Family albums that I was on, named Otis Forrest. And Otis played piano on this album, and he said, I'd love to cut an album for you, but I can save you money. Now, immediately, the old ears ran up, because it's like, save me money, because I'm already I'm borrowing money to do these albums, and we're just trying to get started with this ministry. So, the ringing in the ears went off, and I said, okay. We went down there, and I was going to get, I don't know whether you've ever heard the group Toto. No?
Yes.
Yeah, the classic rock group Toto. Okay. Their bass player was going to play bass on this next album for me, and I was so excited about that, because I love Toto. They're a great band, and I was so excited. And then Marie Osmond called the day before, so we didn't get him because Marie took him. But another bass player came in, and he knew he had to follow David Hungate. So he came in and just so played out. He just was so good on the next album, which was Game Over. I didn't ever meet David Hungate, but interestingly enough, Otis's son, Shannon, played drums. Now I think the first time Shannon ever played studio drums was on my first album with the Spears. He was like 15 years old. But at 15 years old, he was just a prodigy. He was unbelievable. He's gone on to be one of the biggest Nashville producers, produced Taylor Swift, people like that. Shannon Forrest. But Shannon played on this album as well. And now Shannon is touring with Toto as their drummer. So that's pretty cool. So, but this album and Live by the Sword were much more contemporary. Let's see where I'm going here. Oh, okay, now I better hurry, because I only got 10 more chapters to go. Okay. So yeah, I didn't time this, so we'll move on quick. This was much more contemporary than most of the churches in the early 90s wanted. So we did an album with my brother and my mother and Karen and myself that was very Southern gospel. And we worked with Roger again on that one. But we weren't going to go down and record in Nashville, because I didn't have another $6,000 to do that. So we found a studio up in Maryland, and providentially, the engineer at that studio said, "Oh, I do sequencing and I play guitar, and I'd love to do an album for you." So we recorded a live album, a Christmas album, and then an album called Play by Play with him, and another album with the quartet. And he did all the sequencing arrangements. I said Roger did them all, other than these few. And so we did these albums. This took us to the mid-90s. And then, during this tour, the Spear family was going to have a reunion concert in Nashville at Convention. And they called me to come down. I had not been to Convention since, but I went down there. And again, providentially, that night I was walking around, looking at people, talking to radio executives. Hey, and I met Bill Gaither. And I went and I told him, I said, I used to be with the Spears. The Spears are having a reunion concert tomorrow morning. Would love for you to come by. And he said, he's a low talker. I couldn't understand. I don't know whether he was ribbing me or whether he actually talks that soft, but he's really soft. So I was like, okay. And then, so we had practiced and we started doing the Spear concert. As soon as the Spear concert started, in walks Bill Gaither and Mark Lowry, and they come and sit down in the front. Well, which brings me to, because I had gotten out of the industry by that point, but that brings me to Toe Back In, question mark. So he heard me sing. We did Still in the Fire, Saved to the Uttermost, and Ben Spear was at that point his music producer, and they were looking for a tenor singer. So we went. I did some studio work. Just to give you a background how these Gaither videos works. He goes in with singers he knows, and they record the choir vocals beforehand, and then they're kind of pumped in, and then the live group kind of sings along with that. So I was one of the singers that he brought in to do that. So we finished that first night, and he brings me in to everybody else starts to go home, and Ben says, stick around. So Ben Spear and Bill Gaither and Guy Penrod at the time was their lead singer, and me get around the piano, and we start singing. Just, that's how he was auditioning. And I remember him being really surprised that I sang on pitch. Is he always this on pitch? I'm like, I thought that's how you were supposed to sing. So evidently he was trying me out for the Gaither Vocal Band, which, hey, you don't get any more top than the Gaither Vocal Band as far as gospel music goes. But God said no. And said no in a very forceful way. Because I got up the next morning, because we had 2 days of vocals. The next morning I got up, I had no voice. I've never had that happen before. Like literally no voice coming out. And I was like, what's happened? Like I couldn't even talk. Usually I can kind of talk, but singing is hard if ever I have vocal stuff. But I had nothing. And I just chalked that up to God's providence, that he did not want me with the Gaither Vocal Band. So I get up there and I'm kind of lip syncing along with the whole rest of the tenors, just sort of, because I got nothing that's coming out. And then he calls me in the box to do a solo. I'm like, all right, God's humbling me here. So I got up. I couldn't make it through. It was horrible. It was terrible. I had no voice coming out, and from that point on in the whole process, I was able to go and be on the Gaither homecoming things, but it was clear that I was put on day 3 to be on there. That's the stuff that winds up on the floor. Fortunately, Ben Spear let me be a seat fill-in in days 1 and 2 because they don't want any empty seats. So if somebody's got to go to the bathroom, they need somebody to fill in, or somebody didn't show up. So I was on most of the screenshots. I'm there, but I did not have any major part. We sang "He's Still in the Fire" on the 3rd day. No one's ever seen it. Yeah, but that was God's providence. But that also inspired me to want to go back and do a Southern Gospel album. So we did one called Praise Soup, and it was actually the biggest album. No, it was the second biggest album we ever did. We did 2 radio singles, and they got to number 9. Well, one of them got to number 90 on the charts. Come to find out, unless you pay money to advertise in that magazine, same magazine by the way, you cannot get into the top 80. And I did not pay money to do that. So then we did an album called Beware the Dogs. That's my dog. That's Pug. And we did a single off of that, and then realized we are just, because we're pouring hundreds and hundreds, actually thousands of dollars into trying to get our radio singles played, and they're just not getting played. There was one station in Georgia that played us a lot. It was like their number 1 song, and they played it all the time. And they had us come down for a Saturday concert. But if you know anything around here, if there's a concert, then that's probably the only concert within like 6 months of anybody being, here in Maryland. Down there, if you have a gospel concert, there are 20 other concerts within 10 miles. And that's what happened. We got there were like 6 people. And they had gotten a whole, like a theater type thing. There was like 6 people there. And we realized we're just pouring money into nothing. So we pulled our toe out and shot ourselves in the foot. And by that, what I mean is we decided to totally rework our entire, the way we do ministry. And we were going to do it so that it was focused on the churches and not focused on like trying to use a church as a stepladder to become famous. We gave up fame. We gave up the expensive packaging. No store's ever going to carry our CDs, and so that all changed. Karen started writing music more and singing more in the concert. So we officially became Bill and Karen Itzel. Up to that point, it was Bill Itzel. Now it's Bill and Karen Itzel. She's writing, which is changing our sound. Everything we did was about the local church. There's no record pitch. We don't do a big, long record pitch like all these other groups did. Everything I learned with the Spears, we totally ignored and did the opposite. Kind of like what this church does with all of the church growth manual things. If you've ever read a church growth manual, this church does the exact opposite. And the Lord blesses that. And the Lord has blessed us. We weren't going to do expensive studios because we were out of money. In fact, we were so in debt, it was ridiculous. Now we're going to try and be much more frugal in our making of our album. This one was called Two Natures, and we did another one called The Test. Those 2 albums we did early 2000s with late 90s and 2000 at my brother's wife's father's studio. He had just built a studio. There were a lot of things he did not have that we really needed to have, and listening back on those albums, it's really kind of painful because, like, the lead vocal, like if you put headphones on, is panned over here. It was not good. The sound was not good, and the sound not being good actually led us to chapter 8. I'll just do it myself. In 2001, we bought our first little studio. It was a Boss, this is the 1600s, a Boss 800, had 8 channels, and Roger was sending us tracks, so we would do 2 albums worth of 2 tracks, and we only had 6 for vocals, so not a lot of stacks. So we did several albums, and this right here was called Dead Man Walking. We didn't have big covers for our albums. We print everything on the CD itself, and that was what we sold. So, we weren't trying to make it big or even look like we were making it big, but we were able to get it cheaper so we can get them out to more people. This was actually the biggest album we've ever sold. which was like 4,900 copies. I know that doesn't seem like much compared to, you know, people like Taylor Swift and such, but for us that was pretty huge. We did a live album, did another one called Return of the King. Shanna was born. That was us at the Awakening Fest rock concert. Her favorite group was up there, so we were in the mosh pit right there with the baby. God providentially brought us to a church to work with from Dagsboro. It was a Church of God, about 300 people, but all 300 people would work for this one July 4th event. They had a huge plot of land and a big stage, so we led the July 4th. I was hired as music director, and we did the July 4th thing, and then they would have 50,000 people for fireworks. So we were able to give the gospel to 50,000 people on July 4th. We did that for about 4 or 5 years, and God used that to help us kind of get ahead a little bit financially. The kids started singing.
I'm thankful for a feeling good when Mama lets me go. Every day I wake up thankful for a dog that I can squeeze and a sister I can tease. Every day I wake up thankful.
Much Shannon.
When I woke up today, I knelt down to
And even his Shannon. We actually did a family album where the kids would sing, and it would be all focused on the family in 2004. But then with kids, you gotta rock it. I love Ryan's like red patch in his hair there. Yeah. So the kids got older. We've always been influenced by groups like Petra, and at that time there were just a ton of new Christian rock artists that were coming out, and we loved going to those, you know, Awakening Fest and Uprise and things like that, and just, you know, we liked Christian rock. And so our music started to change. Ryan started playing drums. Jessica started playing electric guitar. So our music started changing a little bit. Guns Blazing, 2005. Soldiers, 2006. That featured a song, very patriotic, but it was "Thank you, soldier, for your sacrifice." The second verse turns it around to "Thank you, Savior, for your sacrifice." So that one a lot of people liked. An album called Flawed, which was kind of focused on Romans 1 and our sin nature. The next one was Last Man Standing. Interesting story. Karen and I were at Ocean City writing songs, and we were walking up and down the boardwalk, and I saw, I think it was a firefighter thing or something. It said Last Man Standing on it. And I said, you know what, that'd be a great name for a song. And I said, you know, like the old song, I have decided to follow Jesus. Though none go with me, still I will follow. I'll be the last man standing. She looked over at me and goes, "That's so stupid."
She
said, "That's not, no. Jesus is the last man standing because every knee will bow." And I'm like, man, that's a songwriter right there. And so that's what the song was, became I'd say hit, but we've never had a hit. So that's as close to one as we've probably ever had. And then in 2008, I don't know whether you remember your history or not, something happened in 2008, and the walls come crumbling down. In 2008, we were doing really well. In fact, we had kind of pulled ourselves out of debt, and then the entire country crashed. Love offerings started going down because people didn't have jobs. Churches stopped having us because, let's face it, we are kind of the Starbucks of church ministry, right? If you're gonna set something aside, I just won't have my Starbucks. You know what I'm saying? They didn't need to have us to continue having church. So a lot of churches didn't have us. So we started, which providentially God used, in our life to grow us and have us rely more on Him. We started doing smaller albums with fewer songs because that's all we could afford. We did a Christmas album called A Misfit Family Christmas. That's fun. One called Mountain Climber. In fact, we had a lady who had just gotten her like a new camera, and she's like, "You know what? If you guys come and are willing to do it, I will make a video for you." So we had our first concept video, Mountain Climber. We were rocking back then. Then we did a greatest hits album because that doesn't cost anything. Called Throwback. You just put a bunch of the old recordings together. We did our first worship album called Up, which was kind of a rock worship album. Jessica did a solo album called Revolutionary War. We did another live album because that really doesn't cost anything either because you got all the same songs, called Live It Up or Live It Up. I never really knew. It was a play on words that just didn't work at all. So, but that was that. Now we thought there would be a reprieve in 2012 because 2008, everything had plunged. You knew there would be a change of administration. 2012, everything was still really bad. And so we figured, there might be a reprieve. It wasn't. Obama was elected again, but I'm not going to get into politics. But we did an album called I Am a Christian. A lot of churches started booking us again. We got, for some odd reason, that summer we had so many outdoor concerts, and every concert it would rain right after we set up. We would set everything up, and I would be the pastor. We need to move this inside because rain is coming, and the pastor would say, invariably, I'm trusting God for that it's not going to rain. I'm like, God didn't say it's not going to rain. You got to trust Him on things He actually said. So we had to we're tearing down stuff in the rain. That happened so many times on that trip. We also started Bill and Karen Itzel Ministries in 2012 for the idea to raise money to be able to go on mission trips. We went on 3 mission trips to Nicaragua and a couple others. We went to Yeah, we went to Nicaragua. We got back from Nicaragua, and we had been in the adoption process because we were thinking about, we need to adopt. And so, like 2 days after we got back from Nicaragua, Karen gets a call. We were awaiting family, and it was a distant relative said, I just had a baby, and I can't take care of her. I heard you wanting to adopt, but if you want to adopt, you got to get out here fast. Because the state's going to step in and do something. So it's like we had 2 days to make a decision. Are we going to do this? And we prayed about it, and Karen got on a plane. She flew out there.
Wow.
And Siri was 3 pounds. And you were out there for what? 2.5 months. Every day it was just Karen and Siri, 2.5 months in the hospital till she got big enough to be able to come home. And so we adopted Siri. So we did an album called New Life because we had run out of songwriting ideas. So these are all cover songs. We had, after all these years, we had wanted cover songs. So there's so many songs. It's like, man, I wish we had opportunity to record that. So we did that. The next year we did the same thing, only with worship songs, and these were more CCM type worship songs, Chris Tomlin type worship songs. And then we did another greatest hits. Kind of covering our first 25 years of ministry. And then something happened, like the Itzels, only at Cracker Barrel. I did something that I had not done in 20 years. I decided to go down when Roger was recording our tracks, and actually go down there. Because he told me I'm just the most trusting person in gospel music. It's, that you just let me record tracks and send them to you. And so I'm like, and I went down there and I looked, I know times. It did say till 12:30, so I'm going to try and rush through this here at the end. I walked up and I looked in the studio, and there's a guy playing acoustic guitar, but behind him is steel guitar, dobro, violin, fiddle, all this stuff, and I'm like, ooh. So I told Roger, I said, does he play all those things? He said, oh yeah, so he does. So we started incorporating those kind of those kind of instruments. David Johnson is his name. We had been to the Sing conference, which again, providentially, God used to make me think more about good word-driven worship music, and our music took a turn at that point. We did an album called Glorious Trial, which was our first attempt at doing something that was kind of a transition from what we had been doing with the rock stuff into something like we're doing more now with the more worship-oriented things. It was a mix of original and modern hymns. And then I got to get a real job. That's, at this point, just financially, we were just barely making it, and I just thought to myself, I'm going to need to do something else. After 8 years of really, really bad economy, the church I was with, my dad was the worship leader there. He was retiring. They weren't interested in me, but I heard of another church, and I met them, and God providentially moved us there. We immediately cut our concerts from 120 down to 40 a year. So it just did that overnight. Karen was going to do a solo album, but she was having a lot of vocal trouble at the time. And what was going to be her solo album wound up just being her next album called Hope. But on this album, there was a song. I'll just play it for you.
She came into our family through adoption. The same way I was rescued from the curse. Now she'll know the joy of unconditional love. But she'll
Beautiful.
And how do you speak after that?
It's not easy. Are you telling me I need to write?
No, I'm just saying it was very.
I know. No, it's not easy. But I see God blessing her life every day, and growing her. It's slowly process. You know, she's in youth group now, so crazy. Anyway, we did the next album was Gift of Faith. It was the first crowd-funded album because we're out of money. We did a live album because again we're out of money. We did a mission trip to Ocean City with a bunch of kids. Ryan was the youth leader at that church. I was the worship leader. And but I will tell you, this church was picture Belcroft, and then picture 180 degrees, and that's what this church was. So on December 30th, 2019. They called me in the office. They said, you need to pack up all your stuff. Didn't like the fact I was a Calvinist. Didn't like the fact that I wanted to do word-driven music rather than radio-driven music. And so then, you know, that was the end of 2019. Then 2020 hit. How do I sing with a mask? So we needed to rebuild our concerts real fast, you know, because we did need to eat. So Ryan and I got a job and this is a whole nother providential story, but I don't have time for it. But we had left men's Bible study, and we're on our way home, and Ryan said, we need to stop at this place because I need to go in and get, I guess I'm telling this story. I go in to apply for a job, and it was like an old folks home thing, Fairhaven. I don't know if you've ever heard of Fairhaven up in Sykesville. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'll go in. I'll apply for something. And Ryan applied. We called Matt. Matt Oxt. He came over. Shannon came over. She was going to work in the kitchen. So me, Ryan, and Matt all applied and got jobs as security. You could just, it's just hilarious that they would pick somebody. I guess they felt I looked intimidating. I don't know. But anyway, we all got hired at Fairhaven. I was now without a job, and COVID hit, and we couldn't do concerts. So I'm working at Fairhaven. That's not covering the bills, but another great story of God's providence. The church I was with decided that all of the people, except for the senior pastor, would be hired on a yearly basis. Like, you had to sign a contract every single year kind of thing. So you live by the contract, you die by the contract. I signed it in September. They fired me in December, but they had to pay me all the way through August, even though I wasn't there anymore. So, and they were paying well. In fact, so much so that we actually got financially caught up through COVID because of that. So again, that was just the providence of God. We did an album called Timeless, the hymns of Bill and Karen Itzel Ministry, kind of a collection of our hymns. The funny story on that is that Shannon hates that name because she co-wrote many of those, and I always call it to her face, Timeless, the hymns of Bill and Karen Itzel, not Shannon. She didn't write all of them. We did them. But we also decided to do online concerts. And so each Sunday night, we would do like an online Facebook concert. I don't think you can find those anymore because I looked and something happened. Facebook, I think I still have those, but you can't find them online anymore. But we did online concerts. We were looking for a new church. We had a whole list of churches we were going to try out that were very close to us. And Ryan said, you know what, you ought to go try Belcroft. Because I know Pastor Matt, and I think you'll like him. And I was like, all right. So we walked into the old building, and it was like Sunday school was about to start. Remember when they had Sunday school before church? And Sunday school was going to start, and the praise team was practicing. I walked in the door. They're playing A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, and I'm like, this is it. I'm like, you just totally. I burst into tears. And that's hard for me. I burst into tears, and then we stayed through the first service, and I was like, no, this is the place. And so that was the very first Sunday in 2020, and we've been here ever since. Honestly, I feel kind of like, and you, some of you may have felt this way as well, but it's like, I'm saved for the first time. You know what I mean? It's like, I know that I was saved before, but it's like, I'm starting to now actually, I had the knowledge, but now my life is starting to catch up with the knowledge that I have, being here. I feel kind of like Moses a little bit, leading his family to the promised land. Now, my whole family's here. We're all, all able to be here. Unlike Moses, I'm actually able to be here too. But anyway, so we're still growing. We're still catching up. And then New Year's Eve, and this is a different story. I'll let Karen tell it sometime. But Karen got COVID in New Year's Eve, 2020. We made it the whole year. We were very, very healthy that whole year. And then we all got COVID New Year's Eve. And we were all fine, but Karen wound up on a ventilator for 17 days.
Oh,
and there was a lot of people asking, how's Karen doing? How's Karen doing? And during the time she's being flown to from Westminster, where we are, in a helicopter over to University of Maryland. They're thinking of putting her on ECMO. All the and we don't know. We're trying to figure out all this. So rather than answer 200 emails a day, I decided to do videos in which I would give an update on Karen. But as I'm giving an update on Karen, I'm like, well, but first you're going to have to wait, and I would give the gospel. And then I would give the update on Karen. And every one of these, this is just a screenshot from YouTube, every one of these, I would just give the gospel. And I had so many people coming up saying, that's, you give the gospel in such a plain, clear way. You really ought to do that more. Like that should be something that you do. And I do it in our concerts, but I never thought anything beyond that. Also in that time, Morgan brought me a song called Sweeter, Christ is Sweeter. And I worked it a little bit, added a chorus to it, and my dad's bored. I'm just kidding, he don't know, he's got a meeting. So I left, so I took Morgan's song, and we worked it and did the album called Sweeter, and now we sing that song in church. I haven't for a while. I'm going to bring that back in November. Catching Up on the Gold, chapter 14. I'm almost there. 15 chapters. So everything was kind of coming together. I was, I had a lot of people watch our YouTube videos who I would never have an opportunity to give the gospel to. And I thought to myself, this would be a wonderful thing if we could expand Bill and Karen Itzel Ministries to be able to go and be out on the street and just have conversations with people. And at the same time, Ryan was ready to go full-time out on the street and preach and have conversations with people about the gospel. So, it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that the two of us needed to be doing that together. And so Ryan was leaving Fairhaven, I was leaving Fairhaven, and I just prayed, that God would bring enough supporters, of our ministry so that we could do that along with our concerts and be able to make ends meet. But I realized, even after all these many years, I needed to stop wasting time. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, "For we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad." We'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And 1 Corinthians 3 says, "If anyone builds on that foundation with gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become obvious, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire. The fire will test the quality of each one's work, and if anyone's work that he has built survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, it will be lost, but he will be saved, yet it will be like an escape through fire." So we decided we were going to go out together 4 days a week since the middle of 2021, Ryan and I now go out 4 days a week, and we have conversations with people in 7 different cities. Ryan is with Open Air Campaigners. I'm with Bill and Karen Itzel Ministries, because I already had that there. And so together, we're both supported in that way to be able to live, provide for our families. We've been able to go to mission trips. We went to Ecuador last year. We go to Ocean City every year, and we preach on the boardwalk. We've been to England, and we preached out in the little towns there. At the same time, Ryan recorded an album called Pilgrim Song, which is kind of a musical journey through Pilgrim's Progress that he wrote. But he played the box drum and the guitar. And then we did an album called Time is Short. Shanna got married, and Dan is singing with us now, and Siri is now singing with us as well. Then we did an album called Tolling Bell with the whole group. And then Ryan did an album called Wisdom Song, and providentially, again, the same, the crazy thing is happening in the music industry is, and if you walk through Walmart, you've probably seen this, records are outselling CDs now. How crazy is that, right? Yeah, yeah. Everything is streaming on the phone, so, we used to sell at least 2,000 of every CD, which meant, we could work with Roger, bear that expense and cover that expense in selling 1,000 or 2,000 CDs. Now, we'd be surprised if we would sell 500 of some of those. But, a lot of people are streaming in that way. We sell a lot of flash drives with our music on it as well. But because of that, I cannot justify using Roger anymore, which is sad because I love working with Roger. But providentially, at that same time, we did an album with Ryan where he did all the guitars, all the drums, phenomenal musician, and I did bass and keyboards, and Karen and Shannon both also play some piano as well. And now in the last 2 albums, including our current one, which is called Arrival, we did all the tracks ourselves, which saves us about $3,600 and makes it much more affordable to do that. Which then brings us to, we tested it out on Arrival, and it worked really well, which brings us to the future. So what are we going to do now? My goal is to continue to be faithful. That word keeps just popping up. In our evangelism, it's not about the number of people who are saved. It's about being faithful, because I don't bring the increase. God gives the increase. It takes 2 things to be saved. It takes the preaching of the word, and it takes the Holy Spirit taking that word and opening the eyes of the lost. Well, we can't do anything about we go out, Bob and I go out and with Ryan and stuff, and we can't do anything about opening the eyes of the lost, can we? No, but we can preach the word. So being faithful in that, being faithful in my life, in my marriage, in my parenting, in my study, in my songwriting, in my opportunities to preach, which come along a whole once or twice a year, and in my singing. And in fact, the new album, and you'll be the first to see the album art, is called Faithful. So we're working on that one right now. That should be out by first of the year. It's going to include a lot of songs that we sing here, in some new songs, some old gospel songs like I Saw the Light and Are You Washed in the Blood, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, but also some songs that we sing here like King Forevermore and things like that, and then some brand new songs as well. So, the focus is going to be on good word-driven worship. So, and we'll continue to preach on the streets as long as God allows me to do it. So, that's my life in an hour and a half.
Well, we appreciate your time. And can you tell us how to get your, how to get the albums?
Okay, if you have Spotify, you can. We're on Spotify. If you have Apple Music, just look the Itzels up on Apple Music. That's all there. If you'd like the physical CDs or a flash drive, just let me know, and I can bring some to. Or if you'd like to come out to one of our concerts sometime, go to itzelmusic.com. That's easy enough, Itzel Music. And there's a whole list of where we're going to be. Our goal is 65 concerts a year. We just booked our 66th for this year. So we're booked up this year. We're starting into next year. So if we're nearby, we'd love for you to come out and worship with us. So wherever we are.
Okay.